Assalamualaikum to our lecturer, Dr. Abdul Jabbar Abdullah, and my fellow friends. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Putri Haiza binti Muhammad Kahar.
My name is Dayang Nurdaina binti Abang Ahmad.
My name is Umi Nur Atiyah binti Sapawi from BA Q1A. And today we would like to present about inflation and unemployment issues in China.
I'm here today to talk about inflation and unemployment issues in China. But before that, let me tell you guys about China. China, or an official name of the modern state, is the People's Republic of China. It's a country located in East Asia. China is known as a country that one of the higher populated country in the world, with a population of around 1.4 billion in recent years, 2019. From the higher number of the population, China was the world's third or fourth largest country worldwide with 9.6 million square kilometers. After Second World War in 1949, overpopulation began in China. They were encouraged to have as many children as possible in the hope that they would bring more money and build a better military and produce more food for the country. In December 2019, the COVID-19 pandemic, or also known as coronavirus pandemic, is an ongoing outbreak around the world. Coronavirus are a type of contagious virus that can cause a range of mild to severe respiratory illness. It started and first identified in Wuhan, one of the states of China. Wuhan city also is known as the Chicago of China. The investigation began and traced the outbreak to a seafood market where bats sold and believed to be the origin of the virus. The market was closed immediately in January 2020 after the announcement of an epidemiologic alert by the Chinese local health authorities. During the pandemic in China, some of the sector of economic fell in the beginning because the government directed to stop the economy's activities in place that have been set. China's government has in strategy on how to control and reducing the disease spreading or transmission. They announced a lockdown by closing the airport and suspension of all public transportation to prevent anyone from entering and leaving the country. This announcement was made to reduce the very high population movement and reducing the spread of disease. Next, I will talk about inflation and unemployment issues in China. Inflation is a continuous increase in the general price level of goods and services in the economy. It is an increase in the general price level when a monetary unit actually purchased less than the previous period. The inflation rate for China is 1.71% to November 2019, an average of 4.51% from January 2019. China's inflation rate is increased from December 2019 is 4.5% to 5.4% in January 2020. The print was 4.9% above the forecast of market observes and the best performance in 8 years. Annual average inflation increased from 2.9% in December to 3.2% in January. Factors that influence the inflation in China is economic growth, which is when the country is struck by natural disaster. Economic growth will decline. The inflation rate is increased due to Chinese New Year holiday, coronavirus outbreak, and damage caused by flood in central and southern China. The main cause by inflation in China is because of the demand pull inflation, which is aggregate demand growing faster than aggregate supply. For instance, as the spreading of virus COVID-19, people is required to wear masks. So the demand of masks is increased and cause insufficient of supply. Since that the price of masks is increased. China is the world's most populous country and as a result of its rapid economic development has profited significantly from its large labor market in recent decades. China's labor force has been steadily declining over the past few years. The aging of the population and the low birth rate of the country is the main reason. Unemployment is defined as labor force participants being available and willing to work but unable to find job. In 2019, unemployment rate for China was 3.6%. Unemployment rate of China increased from 3.1% in 2000 to 3.6% in 2019, growing at an average annual rate of 0.95%. China's unemployment rate also increased because in the first 2 months of 2020, approximately 5 million people lost jobs in China due to the COVID-19 outbreak. For the last 20 years, urban unemployment has fluctuated by almost 4% to 5%. That's me at the end of my talk, so I will now hand over to my colleague, Dayan
This
Udayana.
COVID-19 pandemic has led the country to implement social distancing, lockdown, and travel restriction. It can help to reduce the high population movement and spread of the disease. However, this had given an impact on the economy, especially macroeconomics such as inflation and unemployment. The impact of COVID-19 on inflation in China is China's inflation remains low because the coronavirus hammers demand with a measure of price gain that stripped out the food and energy price slumping to the weakest in a decade. The senior China economist said that coronavirus outbreak put downward pressure on inflation, while the supply chain disruption have kept food price high due to high price supply of main resource to consume certain food. Hence, this will affect the price of the food. Also, the weaker demand has weighed on the goods and services. The sudden outbreak of coronavirus caused a complicated impact on the price trend. The rise in CPI was driven by increase in food prices because of the implementation of transport control measures across the country. Likewise, logistic disruption caused by a shortage of manpower which increased the prices. Some of the regions suffered shortage of meat products, instant noodles, and frozen food. As some residents store certain products because of the lockdown implemented to contain the spread of the coronavirus, there is a high demand for them. From the National Bureau of Statistics shows that the Consumer Price Index (CPI) rose 5.2% from a year earlier, down from a 5.4% gain in January. The food price inflation rose a bit due to the supply chain disruption. However, there's a sharp fall in non-food and core inflation, which stripped out both food and energy prices. This shows that the coronavirus outbreak has led to a market weakening in demand side. Price pressure, especially noteworthy, is that a steep decline in both transportation and serious inflation. The fall in producer price inflation was driven by a produce decline within the price of raw materials. Many manufacturers cannot resume their works because they cannot get supplies of raw materials and their workers are quarantined. With many factories closed or facing a labor shortage, the cost of manufacturers' input also edged down. Also, as the World Health Organization announced about the outbreak, Some countries have adopted the short-term measure like entry restriction and suspension of flight, and the import and export as well as foreign-directed investment has suffered. In other words, due to the outbreak of COVID-19, many people have cancelled their plans to travel abroad, which led to significant decrease in China's service trade import. Next, the impact of COVID-19 on employment in China is around millions of people had lost their job amid of the coronavirus in the first 2 months of this year. According to China National Bureau of Statistics, there was increase in employment in China as the rate increased from 5.2% in December 2019 before the COVID-19 outbreak began to 5.9% in March 2020. In the intervening months, many businesses declared bankruptcy. It has recorded the highest in February to 6.2% and has decreased in March. Then in April, rise again to 6%. To make it even worse, it does not include the rural migrant worker. Millions have been working without a contract and without paying into their insurance, or have not worked long enough to collect and leaving them without access to employment insurance. COVID-19 made a hard situation for those who job-seeking college and universities graduate. Most of the companies are struggling to cut costs, and a few would consider expanding their operation. Even if they are hiring, they would choose to hire experienced people who can immediately create profits rather than inexperienced workers who fresh out the college or universities. So next, I will pass to Umi Noatira.
I would like to discuss about how monetary and fiscal policies can be used to solve inflation and unemployment issues. Inflation and unemployment issues are most of problematic matter that occurs when the country having an issue. For example, we could take it from COVID-19. Those issues were really related to economy, especially in China. The question is now, how monetary and fiscal policies can be used to solve the inflation and unemployment issues during COVID-19 in China. Monetary policy is familiar to the most countries in the world, especially it is really related to industry. The definition of monetary policy is the demand side of economic policy, and it is really referring to the action undertaken by Central Bank of China, and this was to control money supplies and interest rate to achieve macroeconomic goals that promote sustainable economic growth. As for China, they tend to keep monetary policy as observing it as they must keep it normal, if possible, to strengthen the strategic period for long-term development during pandemic of COVID-19. China used one of tools which is the discount rate. The discount rate charged by the Central Bank of China to depository institutions or short-term loans. It occurs when individual or the commercial banks tend to borrow additional money from Central Bank of China. They will pay interest on the amount further applicable on the discount rate. And this is the way to control money supplies globally, which literally impacts the availability of money in open market with the decision and power that central bank has. For unemployment issue, China governments tend to use expansionary monetary policy. Type of monetary policy defined as help to prevent unemployment issue as well as to stimulate companies or business activities and consumers spending over the money supply in China. It was specified by if the lower interest rates mean that the cost of borrowing is lower. When it is getting easy to borrow money, people will tend to invest more and spend more of money. Increased aggregate demand and reducing unemployment issue will be happening. Other than that, fiscal policy can be used to solve the problem. In economics industry, fiscal policies can be defined as the use of government revenue collection and expenditures to influence a country's economy. This is which the government adjusts the taxes and tax rates and its spending level to monitor nation economy of the country. The objective of fiscal policy implemented by government is to achieve the economics of stability, full employment, and economic growth. In the end of 2019 until 2020, China implemented an expansionary fiscal policy to support economic growth to prevent economic issues during pandemic. As expansionary fiscal policies mean the government spends more money than it collects in taxes. For example, the government ensures the sum of the important companies have enough resources and necessity to run their operations during pandemic, such as companies that manufacture and transport medical supplies, medicines, and daily necessities for population in China. This company will be exempt from administrative fees and value-add tax. These actions will be contribute to stable unemployment issues during COVID-19. Moreover, the fiscal policy is being used closely coordinates with the monetary policy to maintaining inflation issues in China. Hence, commercial banks are likely to offer more credit at lower interest rate, and after the fiscal subsidies would give the interest payment to ensure the real interest rate loans are lower, which was revealed by recent data. This is how fiscal and monetary policies solve the economic issues such as inflation and employment issues during COVID-19.
In conclusion, coronavirus infection is a zoonotic disease. There is no standard treatment for the disease, and supportive treatment was the only strategy. Although the specific treatment and vaccine are still under experimental trials of development and testing, the best we can do to prevent virus spread is to social distancing. However, China hopes for the rest of the world and reminds other countries that even the most severe situation can be turned around. The kind of passion, commitment, interest, and individual sense of duty that help stop the virus in their country. Many countries need to learn from China to start implementing prevention and control strategies immediately. Besides, countries should work on enhancing their system and personnel in order to be more prepared for future outbreaks and to reduce consequences. That's all from us. Thank you.